Another White Sox starting pitcher got demoted. Not sure if it's time to panic about the rotation's long-term stability, but let's discuss on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan, a contributor for SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Additionally, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Sean Burke surprisingly got demoted yesterday, and let's discuss if it's time to worry about the rotation's long-term stability. Then Lenyn Sosa is on a roll hitting home runs. Let's discuss how his emergence might make him one of the team's best international free agent signings in recent memory. And finally, I'll tackle some of your mailbag questions. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. All right, so Sean Burke has gone from opening day starter to getting demoted. It's a bit surprising given he's leading the team in strikeouts with 110. And the entire pitching, most of the pitching staff just doesn't have too many guys that can miss bats. He's one of the few pitchers, along with like Shane Smith and Grant Taylor, that has the stuff and the velocity that can get swing and miss stuff. Now, Yoendry Gomez, past two starts, has shown that maybe he's got the arsenal to get some swing and misses. And maybe that also empowered the White Sox to say, you know what Sean Burke, what you're doing, not up to standards. So now you got to go to Charlotte because command has been a major issue for Burke this season. He's got a 1.44 whip, and it's also caused his pitch counts to get sky high way too quickly that he's barely eating any innings lately. I mean, he has thrown just 7 innings over his past 2 starts with a 5.14 ERA. And opponents are hitting 294 off of him this month. But at the same time, you want to be like, could this be a little bit of an overreaction? Considering he is 25. He has made a lot of starts in the minors. And again, the stuff is still good. It's just command it. I mean, even manager Will Venables said, it's fastball command that he has to work on. And this is a lost season. Development is basically the whole point of the season. So why are you basically exiling him to Charlotte? That could be one of the arguments too, because it could just be maybe he's gassed. He's already at a career high 117 and 2/3 innings. So the thing that I would say where I critique this demotion is maybe he should have been given the Shane Smith treatment of a 15-day IL stint with a suddenly discovered off-day injury. Now, maybe Shane did have a sprained ankle, but he was also running on fumes. And suddenly he's got a sprained ankle running on an off day. And then he comes back and he's been looking sharp. The stuff looks crisp. Stuff looks like the all-star pitcher that we saw in April and May that earned him the all-star nods before he basically just ran out of gas. But instead, GM Chris Getz is basically putting him in a different environment to focus on things. That's basically what he told Scott Burke of MLB.com. Okay, but that isn't an environment where he had an 11.57 ERA in 2022, a 7.61 ERA in 2023, and a 4.62 ERA last season. And then he comes up to the big leagues for 4 starts, and he looks amazing. And again, Charlotte is kind of a bandbox. It's not exactly particularly, pitcher friendly. So maybe the IL stint, with a injury would have been a better idea because then you could have sent him to the spring training facility to rehab or to focus on some things, kind of like what you did with Hagen Smith and Jairo Uriarte. But either way, he's joining Jonathan Cannon as starting pitchers recently demoted. And now you got to wonder, what's the future of the starting rotation? Now, the front office is saying they're both hopeful about Cannon and Burke long-term, and Cannon had to be demoted. I mean, you can, we could argue like what's there for him to learn, just like, to focus on, just like for Burke, why does it matter? Again, the season's lost. Hey, it's great that we won last night, but wins and losses don't matter. I mean, Cannon was just not being competitive anymore. His last start, he only lasted 1 2/3 innings, and a lot of those pitches they just didn't have anything. And also with Cannon, you kind of have to worry because he just does not have that wipeout pitch. He just doesn't have that finishing move. He's got a decent sweeper. He's got stuff that can induce sweet contact, but a lot of hitters are realizing, okay, I'll just sit on, wait for his mistakes, because he does have to throw a lot of stuff out of the zone. He's more of a command guy with his stuff. Burke, at least, has got the ability to really end an at bat with his curve and his slider and his fastball if it's working and he's commanding it. And the other reason why I pose why, is it time to be a little bit worried or concerned about the long-term health of the rotation and the long-term, what was once looking like a great, promising rotation is, there's some struggles right now going on with some other guys, because the future hope would have been a realized potential Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, Grant Taylor, all three of those guys realizing their potential, along with Sean Burke and Shane Smith, basically coming together to pitch the White Sox to championship glory. But right now, you got Taylor's arm basically figuratively saying it might not be able to handle a starter's workload, so he was moved to the bullpen. Schultz and Hagen Smith are struggling in the minors with their command, and Burke has now joined them in the minors to actually work on command. And for Shane Smith, he will have to overcome endurance issues. And the White Sox pitching depth might not have as much pitching depth as we think it is, at least for right now, because there's some holes in it. You have Kai Bush, Mason Adams, and Drew Thorpe all lost for the season after needing Tommy John surgery during spring training. Aldrin Batista, he was another promising young arm, obviously at the lower levels, but maybe somebody that could have made up for, again, Jonathan Cannon obviously potentially faltering down the road. He's lost for the season. Jairo Uriarte and Tyler Schweitzer didn't pan out as starters. They've been moved to the bullpen. Nick Nashrini was so bad the team cut him. And again, you got Cannon being exposed in the majors for not having that wipeout pitch that it's really hard to even envision, maybe is he going to be a solid number 5 starter? So I think it's time to be a little bit concerned, but not panicked. Because for Burke, again, it's all about command. If he can figure it out, he still has the stuff to at least be a solid number 3 starter. With Schultz, again, it's more about staying healthy and then getting those long limbs to just kind of sync up with his mechanics consistently, because we've seen him dominate. And last year he dominated the Baron, for the Barons. And it took Randy Johnson some time to figure it all out. And with Hagen Smith, again, the command's got to be solved. And you still have young pitchers like Tanner McDougal, Shane Murphy, Christian Hopper, and Grant Umberger, who have the potentials to be great starting pitchers. And again, Bush, Thorpe, and Adams, all that's been lost is just time, because a lot of guys bounce back from Tommy John. And maybe then some of these guys, like Shane Smith, you might want to call up Garrett Crochet to see what did he do to stay steady the past 2 seasons as he kept blowing past his career innings. Well, the White Sox, they crushed the ball last night, including Lenyn Sosa hitting his 3rd home run over his past 4 games. Might be the team's best international free agent signing after Luis Robert Jr. Let's discuss after the break. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. I'm not exactly hopeful Chicago makes a stunning run to the Super Bowl. 2 nights ago, that preseason game, it was fun, but it's still preseason. That is why I think it'd be so cool if Josh Allen in Buffalo finally breaks through and wins the title. Because remember, Sunday night, it was just preseason. So why not double or triple your money by putting some of that down on Allen winning the NFL MVP and Buffalo winning the whole thing? Although if you want to play it safe, I would go with Patrick Mahomes for NFL MVP and Philadelphia repeating. And I always maintain FanDuel's traditional money line spreads and over-unders. They're definitely fun to play. But if you want to win some serious cash, then go with FanDuel's props, parlays, and futures. And you can always, go with a parlay like a couple of division winners, like say Philadelphia, Kansas City, and Pittsburgh, all winning their divisions. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. All right, so Lenyn Sosa is raking everybody, and he's blasting home runs left and right. He has crushed 7 home runs this month, including a 3-run bomb last night that broke the game wide open. And the White Sox obviously needed every single run possible because they only ended up winning 13-9. I mean, I thought they should have easily cruised to victory. I mean, obviously, the Braves play in more of a home run friendly ballpark. Again, another reason why you should be building a power team. Because, again, you're going to play 81 games at Rate Field, which is good for power. And then at least every other year, you're going to play at places like, Truist Stadium or Truist Field. Again, there's so many Truist down in the South. I know, the White Sox minor leagues, they have 2 stadiums named Truist. But either way, you're going to play in a lot more power-friendly ballparks than you are going to be playing in, like if you were Detroit, where, you got to play more to, pitching and defense and contact, or like Kauffman Stadium. Yeah, the Royals, they're built for their stadium. I'm just saying. But, definitely Luis Robert Jr., Kyle Teal, Brooks Baldwin, and Sosa all going yard was definitely needed as the White Sox pick up a victory on the road. And I will discuss the need for more pop in the next segment. But I do want to kind of go over from a different angle of what Sosa's been on, in terms of his run. Now, first, he still remains an anomaly, as he has a 226 average with a 263 on-base percentage over the past 15 days. And yet, he is still producing some crazy slug, a 566 slugging percentage during that same span with 6 home runs. Like I said, he's graduated from the Godfather 3 type player where, just when you want to be done with him, he has like a game or two where you're like, draw me back in. To now, he's just an anomaly. He's the anomaly. He might also just be the next Daniel Polka during this rebuild, but I'm going to discuss with Beefwolf from the 108.com more of that tomorrow. But again, you look, he's got a decent average of 274. His on-base percentage, terrible. But then he's got a 450 slugging percentage, which is at the above average number now. That's where 450 is, 400 to 449. That's a good, that's an average slugging percentage. It's good. It's decent production. But once you get over to 450, you're above average. And his maturation as a decent hitter with a good, with good pop could actually make him the team's best international free agent signing in recent memory, at least after Luis Robert Jr. This is what James Fox of Future Sox tweeted. I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. This is at James Fox 917. It's something that at Sox Machine used to track, I think, but Lenyn Sosa is well on his way to being the best non-Luis Robert signing of the Marco Patti era. Funny how that works. $325K out of Venezuela in 2016, hashtag White Sox. So now you can look at this in a couple of ways. One, it should be looked at actually as a player development win. I mean, whether, Lenyn Sosa, and I saw this tweet, like one guy was like, oh, he's a 0 outs above average, so he's not a terrible fielder. No, he's a terrible fielder. He has no instincts when you look at the eye test. I mean, again, this is a guy that has been asked to play first base, and he can't even locate the bag sometimes. He's had defensive gaffes, last 2 games. Had another major fielding error at second base yesterday. When he played third last year, I mean, there were some times where you're like, what are you doing? So, but if you take away the glove, I mean, what he's doing at the plate, that is a player development win. Because this was a guy that last year was like one of the reasons why he kept getting frequent flyer miles to Charlotte and back was he just couldn't drive the ball. And now he's driving the ball. So he deserves credit, and someone in the player development deserve credit. But on the other hand, you can see Lenyn's emergence as one reason why Marco Patti got fired, and that the International Scouting Department got a huge major overhaul in the offseason. Because outside of Sosa and Luis Robert Jr., because Jose Abreu, I'm sorry, he doesn't count. He was 27 years old when he was signed. And even Luis Robert Jr. was a little bit on the older side. I think he was like 21, 22 when he signed, or like 20. He wasn't like, hey, they found this guy, they found this kid who was 15 or 16, like what they keep signing right now, and got him all the way to the major leagues. Lenyn Sosa is pretty much it. Excuse me one moment. I got to hit the cough. But the misses were massive under Marco Patti. Yoelqui Cespedes, Oscar Colas, Jorge Vera, Michael Adolfo, and Yolbert Sanchez. These were all international free agent signings that made headlines, at least when the Sox made these signings. These were guys that were $1 million bonuses or six-figure bonuses. And only Colas gets to the show. And he was quickly exiled to former manager Pedro Grifol's doghouse, never to be heard from again. He was given a little bit of a runway, and then when he started overthrowing cutoff man and just swinging whenever he wanted, completely fell out of favor. And now he's completely gone from the organization. Brian Ramos, he got a shot last year, but he has now tumbled down the prospect rankings. And I feel like he's also tumbled down the organization's prestige rankings, because he struggled this year at AAA Charlotte. And they have not even considered ever calling him up this year at all. And he's barely played the outfield, which is like, that's probably his only last shot to make a major league contribution, because Miguel Vargas and Curtis Mead pretty much have corner spots wrapped up for a while now. And I think Sam Atanachi has passed Ramos by, in terms of prestige. And you got Caleb Bonemer, who might have to play third. I mean, there's just no more room in the infield for Brian, and he might not even never make it. And Jose Rodriguez was another player that did nothing for the White Sox before he was cut. And Wilfred Veras, he went from showing promise as a power hitter in the minors last year to struggling big time at AA. Now, Christian Minaya could have been a potential win, but the Sox traded him to Arizona for the older Dominic Fletcher. Now, in a lot of ways, though, it's hard to blame Marco Patti for this, because all his team did is sign guys. It's just like Mike Shirley when it comes to drafting. All these guys can do is identify the talent if they have a good process. Now, you can question the process that Patti had, but that's all they're really doing. It then gets over to the player development guys. Those are the guys that got to get them into the majors. So I do think Chris Keller's staff needs to focus more on getting players out of the Dominican and Venezuela, and then reopen Japan for the love of everything. And I don't want to take away from what Lenyn Sosa is doing, but if he is like one of your big wins outside of Luis Robert Jr., that's a huge reason why the team is so far behind in terms of talent. Well, it's Tuesday. I'm trying to make a mailbag segment on Tuesdays, a weekly thing. So let's get into your mailbag questions after the break. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get on the game. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Caleb Williams does this season playing for Ben Johnson. Although as the season starts, maybe you might want to choose less on what Prize Pick projects for Chicago's offense, like what they have for Caleb Williams passing yards or touchdowns, because, just trying to get more comfortable with the offense, but then maybe go with the, go with more as everyone gets more comfortable. And I just love how Prize Picks is just so simple to play. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. Run your game. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcasts, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. Probably one more show that I have to do here, and then I will hopefully be relocated back to my normal studio that I got in my basement. But right now, just one more day of drying out. They ripped out my carpet, and then I got to figure out what am I going to do with my basement on that type of event. So, if you ever get flooding damage, just call 1-800-WATER damage. I know they're not a sponsor of the show, but man, they were really good to me there. So I got 2 mailbag questions to tackle this week. First one is from TR, and he writes this: "Hi Todd, big fan. Is it me, or are those Sox swinging at the first pitch too often? I feel like the opposing pitchers are getting out of these innings with minimal pitches because the Sox are jumping on the first pitch, usually leading to an infield grounder or pop-up. Let me know if I'm onto something or just being a crank, TR." Well, again, TR, thank you for the email. I really appreciate it. All right, so what I found surfing Google, because it was really hard to, I couldn't find anything on Fangraphs or Baseball Reference. Baseball Savant 2 is just trying to drill down, figuring it all out. But what I found on Google, at least what the AI pulled out, was 28% of the time the Sox are swinging at the first pitch, which is below league average. However, they could have been pulling from some older sources. But I think, TR, or maybe you're kind of getting this view is, first of all, that was a huge issue, obviously, before they brought in Ryan Fuller to be the director of hitting this year, and before they made more of a conscious effort to kind of just hit Control Alt Delete on their Moneyball perspective and just get back to getting guys on base. But I also think you might be a little bit right when you watch a guy like Andrew Benintendi, because Andrew Benintendi likes to swing early in his at-bats. He even said it. He even said that, hey, I'm trying to tell Chase Meindroth, be more aggressive, swing early. When one of Chase Meindroth's biggest traits is being able to take pitches, having a good eye, that type of stuff. And I know Colson Montgomery, from my eye test, he's up there looking to crush. So if he looks and sees something, he's definitely going to try to swing at it and take a hack. But, one of the things it could be too is, especially in the first at bat, the old saying is usually if you're facing a starter, the first at bat is you're just trying to get a look at the stuff. And the White Sox have implemented the new pitch machines that can kind of simulate what a pitcher throws so that they're prepared, but it's still, Steve Stone has made the case too, and I know Dan Plesac too when he's called the games. It still is nothing compared to actually the real live stuff coming off a pitcher's hands. So usually that first at bat is you're just trying to figure out what this pitcher has, and usually if you get a hit, it's because you guessed on a mistake correctly. Then it's the second pitch, second at bat, you're just trying to get the timing down, and then it's the third at bat where you're trying to do a lot of damage. Again, that's one of the reasons why you're not seeing starters go so long anymore. It's just because usually to the third time in the order, hitters start to win the battles. Also, when it comes to just simple hitting strategy, you're either trying to, jump on a mistake, or you're trying to hit a pitch that you can drive. You're trying to find your pitch. It's one of the reasons why a lot of pitchers now are, strategy is so big right now, and preparation is such a key role. So if it does come early in the count where a pitcher or a hitter swings, especially early in the game, I got no problem with that, because, maybe that was the mistake and they're just jumping on it. And sometimes the scouting report is, let's jump on this guy right now. Yeah, was it? I think it was Sean Burke or Shane Smith. One of the adjustments that was being made is you got to get aggressive. So sometimes it also is the pitcher you're facing that the game plan dictates it. Now, obviously being late and popping it up, or, we contact, especially if you're popping it up, then yeah, you're late on it or you're way too early. Usually late because you're swinging under it. That's an issue. But, what you're trying to do is obviously jump on the mistakes. And yeah, if you see your pitch, I've got no problem with them, swinging at it right now. Although the general approach, as I've been understanding it, when I read the content, like for example, on Sox Machine, or again, you take in the broadcast and that type of stuff, basically the approach under new hitting director Ryan Fuller is avoid, swinging outside the zone. Basically, you're wanting to look for your pitch as long as it's not outside the zone. And when you get your pitch, try to launch it. Otherwise, work the count to get a walk. I mean, that's basically the strategy if you're seeing that. But I get it, where you're coming from. I don't think you're being a crank because first of all, we've been conditioned for the past couple of years that this team is not disciplined in their approach. This year, I think they've been much better. And yeah, you got some guys that they are going to jump early, again, like an Andrew Benintendi. All right, this next email is from Beck. He says, hello, I appreciate all the White Sox podcasts you put out daily. Thanks, Beck. Here are my questions. One, if Getz does get a free agent, what are the odds the player will be a big name or have a major impact on the 2026 season? Two, what year do you think the White Sox will reach 500? Three, what do you think of Chris Meade so far? I know you've already touched on some of these topics before, so please don't feel pressured to work them into an episode if they don't fit. I really appreciate your time, you taking the time to read my questions. Thanks, Beck. Hey, again, appreciate you reaching out, Beck. Again, and always, guys, feel free to reach out. If you want to have an electronic pen pal, I'll try to talk baseball with you as long as it's respectful and it doesn't get weird between us. That type of stuff. To answer your first question, I don't think they're going to, again, sign a big name free agent. I mean, I would love for them to add Kyle Schwarber. He'd be the perfect guy to add on, even though it would be like a 4-year deal. He would be the perfect guy because, again, they need slug. And all you're going to do is ask Kyle Schwarber to just, hey, man, hit as many home runs as you can for the next 4 years. And while it could be an and done situation, I'm willing to take the risk because he does get on, Schwarber also does work walks, that type of stuff, but you need slug. But I don't think they're going to do it. I think it's going to be another offseason of 1-year bridge deals just because, one of the things is, and rightfully so, like you don't want to block Brandon Montgomery's path to the big leagues. And Chris Getz has acknowledged he doesn't want to clog most of these, guys' path to the show for guys that actually have a legit shot. So again, I the one thing I could see them doing is maybe shopping in the figurative discount bin in the free agent market instead of, for those 1-year guys, instead of the scrap heap bin like they were shopping in last offseason. Like, for example, instead of Martin Perez as the starter free agent that they add at $3.5 million with a $1.5 million buyout, maybe they go with the pitcher in that 10 to 15 million range. Because I do think right now they could still use a veteran starter who has the endurance to get through the season. I mean, obviously Davis Martin is going to have another year under his belt, so he could be that sage veteran, but it's only going to be a year and a half of experience. So again, it can never hurt to have a guy like, for example, Martin Perez. And he did stick around with the team to still provide sage guidance. But, maybe just somebody that is a little bit better, maybe has obviously some velocity. I could see them maybe doing that, but more in that 1 year, $10 to $15 million range. Maybe some better bullpen arms that can be flipped at the deadline. And then possibly they tap into the first baseman market, just depending on how does Curtis Meade do the rest of the season. And regarding your question around Meade, I want to see him out there as much as possible. I mean, he did come potentially with a fixed swing, so I want to see it every day. He should be in the lineup every day. Him and Miguel Vargas should be swapping who plays first and third for as much as they can. With if one of them does need a day off, then fine, you sit him, but give him the runway. And that's one of the reasons why you said he didn't have much success in Tampa. At least that's what I remember Chris Getz, one of the reasons saying. And I do like that he's hitting 278 with a 350 on base percentage for the Sox so far, but he's got to start driving the ball because he has just a 278 slug. So I'm somewhat pleased that he's kind of, I think he's just kind of easing his way in, which is nice. He doesn't look like he's being held hostage like Miguel Vargas was last year. And I like, again, that he's taking the approach kind of like Edgar Carroll and Kyle Teal did of, they're easing themselves into this team, just focus on making contact, getting on base. And that's fine for now, but eventually you do need them to drive the ball. And then what year do I think they'll reach 500? I'm going to say 2027. I mean, it would be great if they could do it in 2026. It's hard to see them going from a 55 win potential total to 81 wins in a season. That's a huge leap, but growing by 15 to 20 wins next year and then another 10 to 20, I could see that potentially happen, especially if Brandon Montgomery and Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz all reach their potential. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And I'll be back tomorrow with an updated list of who should be part of the White Sox core with Beef Loaf of FromThe108.com. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding if it's time to be concerned about the rotation's long-term stability, Lenyn Sosa being the team's best international free agent signing since Luis Robert Jr., and this week's mailbag questions. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub, or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.